Yeah, I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just catapulting towards some greater purpose?
Average fat cats with bloated ego. We are the only DJ crazy enough to tattoo Jackie Brown on his ass.
This is Michael Mann, and I ride with
Extended Clip.
But from my vantage point, it's like I'm watching the Malcolm Baum show with Eddie.
And Malcolm's going to call a guest over to the couch, and I'm going to have to scoot down. You know,
this is like the scene in Citizen Kane where Joseph Cotton like gets drunk to tell Kane off. You know what I mean? And like the angle like is just making Kane look huge the entire time. Like that's the angle they have on me right now.
Yeah, the listeners can't tell, but we did restage our studio setup for the Citizen Kane episode to, you know, get some deep focus going. I have a low angle. You know, I dug a hole in the bottom of my apartment to put the camera into, and with the low angle, you could see the ceilings, and Malcolm looks very distorted and strange, and I'm only being seen through a vase, which makes me distorted in a funhouse way, you know?
I'm looking like 50-year-old Kane here, you know what I mean? It is funny. Like, I'm just laughing right now because it's like, it's not a visual podcast, but we're just talking so much about how it's looking, you know. You know, I guess that's just what we do. It's the analytical mind, you know what I mean?
The analytical mind.
Like even we analyze our own frames, you know. Every frame, analyze it like a painting, you know.
I think that should be the new tagline for the podcast. Extended Clip, home for analytical minds. Welcome to Extended Clip. It is episode 403, and I'm one of your hosts, Eddie Averill.
I'm Malcolm Baum.
I'm JT White.
And on this very special episode today, we are talking about the granddaddy of them all. Well, actually, I don't know. If you were to call a film the granddaddy of them all, maybe it would be Birth of a Nation.
Well, they say you can't choose family, right? Like that's the, you know, that's I don't know. I think Kane's kind of replaced this in the can. I think like back in like 1919 when they did like the Sight and Sound list, just Birth of a Nation at the top, and then by like 1929 they're like, it's like maybe that's like top 50.
I think the first Sight and Sound list was like in the mid-50s, and Citizen Kane was number one.
Yeah.
But I think Birth of a Nation was pretty high on that original list, and just slowly slides like Shadur Sanders at the draft.
Damn,
you know,
wow. What a great comparison. Well, I'm looking at it like this, right? Like I said, you can't choose your family, right? You know, and it's
he
like,
definitely can't choose his family.
I mean, there's so many layers to this conversation that I'm juggling like three things at once right now. But you know, Birth of the Nation is like the hateful grandfather in your lineage, and then Citizen Kane is like the cool uncle who lived life the right way.
Yeah.
And so you're like, maybe traditionally we're supposed to honor the patriarch and the grandfather, but actually I'm more influenced by my uncle. So
Uncle Kane.
Yeah. Birth of a Nation is your MAGA grandpa at Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
Citizen Kane is the unk that goes on the cousin walk with you, and he's got the good shit.
Yeah. Intolerance is your like new step grandma. Like that's your grandpa's new wife.
true.
Lost in Translation is your lesbian aunt.
Imagine going on a cousin walk with Citizen Kane and he just pulls out a 12-inch fucking cigar. You're like, God damn, bro.
Okay. Really didn't know where you were going with that one. The implications of the cousin walk are far too grand to throw in the 12-incher prelude.
Well, yeah, maybe if you come from like a D.W. Griffith type family. I don't know. Cousin walk's very normal where I'm from.
Well, yeah, exactly. If you're coming from a Griffithian family, then what goes down on the cousin walk is more of a, matrimony stroll.
It's more, like a romantic walk through the park.
Exactly. But I think that is the hidden implication of the cousin walk. Is
I don't think it is.
Isn't it?
No. You just go smoke. The hidden implication is that you smoke weed outside. I don't think it's that you fuck each other.
Well, I think it's because I conflated the two things that people post about on Thanksgiving all the time, which is like...
Well, Wild Strawberries is kind of like the long cousin walk. 'Cause
That's
it's
true.
about him being in love.
Well, I hate to go for the low hanging fruit, but I think you're listening to too much Kanye. You listen to that Cousins.
That's true.
Track,
That's
know?
true. Well, no, exactly, because I always thought like when Thanksgiving comes around and I'm looking at the internet, it's usually like twofold, where like half the people are doing cousin walk memes, and then half the people I follow are searching the phrase "hot cousin" on Twitter and posting screenshots of it.
I think we're learning a lot about you and your relationship to your family.
No, it's not me. It's other people I follow searching on
Interesting.
Twitter for the phrase "hot cousin."
And you could see what people search for on Twitter? Is that like
No,
a
you
thing?
can see what people post on Twitter.
Okay,
Come on, man.
okay.
You know how Twitter works.
Okay, yeah, of course. And
But like around Thanksgiving, you do that, and then you get all these posts that are like, "Damn, my badass cousin is tempting me tonight." It's like, bro, what?
it's just on the For You page, you know. You're just
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
it's not okay, yeah.
I don't know. To me, that is like a time-honored tradition of Thanksgiving, is people searching incest-related terms from people drunkenly tweeting them and posting screenshots.
Okay,
of it.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was a little bit lost. I was a little bit.
Look, it's early in the morning. You know, it's we're doing our drive time.
And these are topics are as sensitive as topics get. So,
Yeah,
you know,
these are
it is
usually late night topics too.
true.
The cousin walk
Incest.
doesn't happen until dusk.
Yeah, true. You don't want it. Yeah. You can't, like, if people have an early Thanksgiving taking the cousin walk, like 2 p.m, it's like, it's not even worth it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
did we already introduce the episode?
No.
I think we
No.
did.
Oh,
I
we
think we
did?
said our names.
I think we said our names. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did, but we didn't say what we're, but it's been brought up, so I think
Yeah.
people could.
Today's episode is on Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith. No. Today's episode is on Citizen Kane, the debut film by Orson Welles. You know this one. Have you guys ever heard of this movie, Citizen Kane? One of the
yeah.
great films of Hollywood.
When I was watching Citizen Kane, like, I just thought it'd be funny if someone hit me up, like, asked me, "Hey man, what are you up to right now?" I'd be like, "Nothing much, man. Just watching Citizen Kane. You know, no big deal. Just
I'm
always
watching
on my
Citizen
grind."
Kane. Yes.
No, that's. I had that thought the other day, cause like I went home after work. I was sick, and I just like went in bed and watched Citizen Kane. And like I was telling some of my coworkers the day after about it, and I was like, "This is like in your mind, the stereotype of like a guy that's into movies. Like every night he goes home and watches Citizen Kane and smokes a pipe and sort of strokes his chin."
I feel like I'm back in film school with this one. This, rewatching this has kind of revitalized my youth. I feel like, I'm trying to pull up notes, see if like I have like notes from like watching it in class when I was like 19 or something.
Searching Citizen Kane in your Google Docs to find something from 2019 where you said Citizen Kane invented deep focus photography.
Basically, that would be it. That would be it. It would be talking about like some Greg Toland masterwork. So yeah, I don't know if we'll find anything there, but it's and I had seen it before then too.
Sure.
Of course,
Yeah, let's take a personal journey through this. Citizen Kane. I'm gonna guess, Malcolm, you watched this for the first time. You were either 18 or 19, and it was your first year of like proper film schooling, and you'd already been like a cinephile for a while. JT, you were 14, going through the like AFI top 100 movies of all time. How close am I there?
Wrong. I definitely watched it in high school.
Before college. Okay.
I feel like I'm trying to see if I bet I logged it on Letterboxd the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
You were spot on with me. That's right on the money.
I mean, Malcolm, you know how to look at your all your logs for one movie, right?
No, to be honest, no. I'm trying to figure it out.
This is the Letterboxd segment. No, you haven't logged this before. It would have shown.
What?
Yeah, it would have shown a 2 next to the little eyeball here.
Oh, well, I didn't relog it since.
Oh, okay. So then you go watched. Oh, nope. you never actually like logged it. You just marked it as watched and rated it 4.5 stars. Which, hey, that's not a spoiler. We'll see where we get on this time. Yeah.
True. Well, yeah, I guess I don't know exactly when, but I feel like it was before.
Before you started college.
Yeah.
Where you already had a Letterboxd in high school.
Yeah,
I forget about this. You're a Zoomer.
Yeah, no, I'm a young man. I have so much of my life ahead of me.
I don't think it would have been possible for me to have a Letterboxd in high school. Letterboxd wasn't invented until I was in college.
It was definitely in the back. I think it was 2015.
Yeah, and that's when I joined.
And I think that was pretty early. And one of the biggest accomplishments in my life, it is, my username is just Malcolm.
Yeah.
On Letterboxd. It's like, damn, did this guy invent the website, or how did he get that username?
Did he invent the website? I watched this for the first time in 2016 and have rewatched it in 2020, 2024, and now just the other day. I feel like this is one of those movies where we talk around it a lot because people have talked about the actual text so much and it has such an insane reputation. I mean, this was like the go-to answer for what's the best movie ever for about 80 years, and it wasn't until Vertigo replaced it on the Sight and Sound list, but like I also don't think that replaced it in the popular consciousness. Like, just because Vertigo took over as the number one on Sight and Sound, I still think Citizen Kane was like, you just ask a person on the street who has heard of a movie from before 1970, it's Citizen Kane.
I mean, also, not to bring it to the sports realm, but you can't help but think of like voter fatigue, right? Like, I feel like with the Sight and Sound list, it's like, it's like the MVP. It's like you could just give it to Jokic every year, but it's like maybe it's just more fun for the voters to be like, let's bring Vertigo in, there's always like a desire to like change and evolve with the times, you know what I mean? And I feel like the lists always reflect that, which is, I guess, sometimes a good thing. But, and if I were to make like, I don't know if Citizen Kane is like my number one with a bullet movie of all time, but it is, pretty great movie, obviously.
Yeah. So for those who don't know the context of this, obviously Orson Welles was already something of a artistic superstar at the time. He was very, very critically acclaimed in the theatrical world. He had just staged, I think, Voodoo Macbeth. Is that the one that he was doing before this? But him and his Mercury Theater group, and he also, of course, had the infamous War of the Worlds broadcast. And so around 1940, RKO, offers him free reign, basically, to do what he wants on a motion picture, and it's not like the highest budget movie in the world, but it did have a lot of resources to it. This is a movie that really like allows someone for the first movie of their career to just get thrown into it like as if it was their 8th or 9th, like I feel like so many debut features have this built-in sense of timidity and like not exactly swinging for the fences, but I think Welles had become such an egotist through his theatrical endeavors that he was like, all right, for my first movie, I will make the greatest movie of all time. It wasn't an accident. Like, I feel like he was trying to reinvent everything that the language of cinema could do as his goal for this movie, rather than just tell a story through pictures like so many other directors were doing at the time.
Yeah, there's like, I think Welles has like one filmed experiment sort of before this.
Yeah.
Like with the Mercury Theater. Like he was doing, I think the show is called, or at least the film is called Too Much Johnson.
Yeah, which is great. And it was like a filmed portion of a hybrid kind of thing. Like it was like a stage show that had a filmed projected portion of it.
Yeah, but I think, the projected portion from what, like, I mean, even then, like, just shows how ambitious of a creative Welles is, because I don't think it was actually ever projected with the play, because like they're just, the facilities they were performing at did not have projection. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like boy genius aspect of Welles going in and like just sort of this creative mastermind. I don't know. You see it from the beginning that like he's just so interested in pushing the limit of the form of really any medium he works in.
Yeah, and like also I feel like the way movies were at the time, a lot of like studio oversight, and like there was just a lot of established frameworks for movies, and just to kind of, just to have the foresight to be like, just to break these kind of set frameworks and just do things that might seem small, in terms of like where you place the camera, but it ends up being so major. And like what you were talking about, like first films, like there are a lot of like feature films where it's just like people just trying to get to A to B to C, but then there's also, I feel like a lot of people, they kind of have like a young man's ambition when they make a first film, and sometimes they just try to make something kind of crazy and revolutionary, and a lot of the time maybe it doesn't work, but I feel like that comes from the success and all the legacy that Citizen Kane leaves behind.
I mean, this is an unconventional film from the very first frame that you see after the RKO title, or after the RKO logo. Like, this is at the peak of very standardized opening credits sequences in Hollywood movies. You watch any other RKO production from 1941, it's going to be somewhat standardized opening credits, but here you just have that very minimal white on black, a Mercury production by Orson Welles, obviously announcing his authorship right up top in a way that most don't. And then the big block letters, Citizen Kane, with no like copyright at the bottom of it or any other corporate logos or anything. Like, I feel like this is one of the very rare Hollywood movies that has a title card that doesn't have the name of the production company / distributor on it, for whatever that's worth. It's just like within 30 seconds of throwing this thing on, he was playing by different rules than everyone else in his era,
Just in making this pick and presenting the idea of like, oh, okay, I'm going to do first and last films by a filmmaker. I don't know. It got me interested in looking towards the full scope of Wells's career and thinking about like from these early beginnings what like the consistencies are with The Other Side of the Wind. And I was just blown away, like, because I watched the two films that we're talking about this week, like, out of order, where I, like, watched Other Side first because that was the real, like, I don't know, their impetus for my pick was like, it's been, like, a few years since The Other Side of the Wind came out. Like, I loved it at the time, and I just feel like it's something that, like, definitely one of my favorite movies now, and I want to revisit it. And going from Other Side to Kane, it's just like, yeah, impressive that, I mean, Wells just maintains similar fixations, like two stories about like quote unquote great men, just like titans larger than life, told in like unconventional like narrative styles, filled with like tons of different perspectives. I mean, the way that is like literalized in Other Side of the Wind with like the different camera perspectives and versus here where it's just like, okay, we're going to go to a bunch of different people who knew Kane. I was surprised how much like synchronicity there is between these two works.
Yeah, and I mean, it expands further than just those two as the bookends, too. Like, this is something that Wells would return to throughout his career. Mr. Arkadin, I think, is the best example of that. Like, I think Mr. Arkadin is the closest he ever came to reworking Citizen Kane in a way, in like a post-war environment, and also, with Wells being kind of in the midst of the lower point of his career. It's hard to say what the low point was necessarily, but this is his European phase, when he makes Mr. Arkadin. So, yeah, and for those who don't know this movie at all, which is kind of insane, but also no shame either, I think that's something to get into, that, like, I bet there's a bunch of cinephiles who haven't watched this movie because they're scared. Like they're intimidated. They're like, well, what if I think it's just like a 3.5? You know, like what if I think it's just fine, and then like everyone's gonna hate me, or they think it's homework. You know,
Totally. Yeah.
Which some classics are homework, like Birth of a Nation. That's
Yeah.
fucking homework. That's one of the most boring things like you could sit through. Honestly, Intolerance is fantastic, but Birth of a Nation is a tough sit, man. Beyond the racism. But this movie just announces itself right away as being such a like bombastic and bravura piece of filmmaking from the opening like newsreel. I mean, the first time I threw this on, I hadn't seen any Wells movies, and I was expecting it to be a little homeworky. And then that news on the march thing starts, and you just get that like booming voiceover that's like very funny to me, with a lot of like just silly kind of ironies throughout that opening newsreel that feel like Simpsons jokes, you know, and continually referring to Kane as the landlord of his estate, you know. Like I feel like the opening newsreel being not quite a hatchet job, but like a pretty harsh depiction of the man's life that we're about to delve into does a great job at like setting you up for the like tragic irony of the movie and the comedy therein too. Like I think people watching this without much context might not expect it to be funny or allow it to be funny, you know? Because I mean, laughter in movies that aren't comedies, sometimes it's a thing where you have to let it happen when you don't have the context. And for some people listening to this, they're like, that's nonsense because Citizen Kane is very funny, you know. But a lot of people, they don't see it like that. I mean, part of it is like a feedback loop thing where I say that the newsreel has like Simpsons type jokes. This is also the movie that Prime Era Simpsons rips from the most. There's like 8,000 Citizen Kane references between seasons 2 and 8 of The Simpsons, more than The Godfather, more than any Kubrick, like as much as they reference those guys too. And I think that seeing those references in The Simpsons loops back to me as a cinephile watching Citizen Kane and thinking that those things are funny, I guess. Yeah. But like it is funny, you know, like when they're celebrating Kane poaching the staff of the other newspaper and all those girls sing a song for him, and it's obviously the same song that Smithers gets a bunch of people to sing for Mr. Burns. Like the first time if you're watching this without that context, maybe you just think like, yeah, this is a scene about a guy with a big ego and it's extravagance and all this decadence that's unnecessary. But once you realize how like ridiculous it all is and how the film is satirizing Kane's own ego in that moment, it becomes very funny. And then the Simpsons version of it is like a shorthand to that satire.
Growing up watching The Simpsons and I don't know, watching shows like it, you know, there's like a lot of references to stuff, you know, that you don't know because you're so young, and then you actually do watch them, and then I feel like it subconsciously or consciously there's just like connections going off in your head where you're just like, oh wow, okay, that's where that's from. And
I mean, the first time I went through all the Stanley Kubrick movies, it was like, oh, there's like a Simpsons joke every 30 minutes basically.
And I like that you brought up the dancer scene, you know, the celebration scene after he poaches the competing newspaper staff,
which by the way, that's the move. Like next week, you know, in 2024, I looked at graphtreon.com and it was like being a kid at the candy store. And
well, tonight, 6 years later, I got my candy, all of it.
You know, and then I'm Joseph Cotton. I'm writing like a bad review.
Of my movie.
Yeah.
My movie that I make
about podcasting. But what I found funny about that scene, and it reminds me of the Smithers recreation of that, because maybe the Simpsons writers were thinking the same thing as me, where I find it so funny, and it's just like some old timey shit. I'm guessing that's what I'm chalking it up to. But like, you hire a bunch of like hot girl dancers for like your corporate party, and then there's just like a guy in a pinstripe suit being like singing to you, like kind of being like the centerpiece of it all. I'd be like, could you just leave the guy at home? You know what I mean?
The pinstripe suit guy that's the perfect thing. I mean, it's definitely the Simpsons writers on the same track as you, because they bring that back, like in a lot of other stuff. Like obviously the Marge vs. the Monorail musical number, the centerpiece of that is like ultimate pinstripe guy mugging, you know. And I think that, like, I mean, you listen to those Simpsons commentaries, such an influence on them was classic Hollywood cinema, you know? Like, all of the random, like, guys at Moe's or cab drivers or, like, random background characters that get one line, like, they're all just based on 30s to 50s movie guys, you know? This is a podcast about The Simpsons.
I was going to say, let me pull up my episode guide that I used to read.
I mean,
night.
I would, frankly... and this might out me as a cinephile, but like, it's actually really tough. If I had to choose between the corpus of Orson Welles and seasons 2 through 8 of The Simpsons, that's tough.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually really tough for me. I might go Simpsons. But like, never watching F for Fake again is crazy. Like, it would be really hard for me not to watch F for Fake again, or to see the greatest translations of Shakespeare through the cinema, or, you know, The Other Side of the Wind, or Kane, or, you know, his classic noirs. But The Simpsons is The Simpsons. Like, that is truly, like, I know people use media as like a stand-in for religion, like exaggerating, but that's the closest thing I have to a religion is prime era of The Simpsons, you know?
Well, yeah, it's like I always say with Sandler, it's like, it's the thing I've always liked. I've never like wavered on, you know, and that's always something that's nice to have, something that you've liked throughout your childhood, and, you know, it continues and you enjoy it kind of in the same way.
I met someone the other night at a party who was the son of a former showrunner of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And like, I've never geeked out and glazed harder. Like, I was just like, like he was wearing like a cool Simpsons shirt, and I was like, damn, dude, is that like an OG? Like, he's like, yeah, my dad worked on the show.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, what'd your dad do? And when he said the word showrunner, I just like went total like computer mode and just listed off every showrunner of The Simpsons from the original run until I said his dad's name, and he was like, yeah, that's my dad. And I was like, dude, that's crazy. He did seasons X and Y. I'm not going to say which ones, because I don't know. I don't want people tracking this guy down, I guess.
Let's out him.
But yeah, like when he told me who his dad was, I was just like right away about to just list great episodes from his run, and I had to stop myself.
I feel like on this rewatch, I feel like I kind of digested the political nature of the movie more than I had before. And, you know, it's right from like the beginning, you know, even before the newsreel, like just you see all the details of Kane's mansion, all the, you know, the rich accents. And then, you know, you go to the newsreel, and even if it's not necessarily positive, it just shows you that, you know, this is like the classic way where wealthy people, and, you know, particularly wealthy people with like power, like someone like a media magnate like Kane, can really like, that's how they like, they just have this veneer of respectability through just, you know, material things and just influence over the media. Like it's just like, before we even hear Kane talk, we see all his cool stuff and we see his legacy and all that stuff. And it's just kind of funny, you know, especially since we're doing first and last movies, you know, where The Other Side of the Wind is a very legacy heavy movie. And like right from the jump, like Wells is like putting that all into heavy consideration. And I think that's something that's kind of, I don't know, different from other movies of the time too. It's just, Kane's just very like forward thinking and like, you know, what people's reputations are and how those contrast to how they actually are, and what that says about, you know, the world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, to continue down that political spiral, like he has aspirations for elected office. Obviously, that's one of the main plots of this, is his gubernatorial election. and that's thwarted by the kind of world he created. Because if you don't know, obviously Charles Foster Kane, the story of an orphan turned newspaper tycoon / media magnate and politician. He runs, the biggest yellow journalism paper there is in the Inquirer, and is just like using it as a money pit because he inherited so much from his adopted family, and then just kept, grinding and going for success. And I'm sorry, I'm distracted because Boris really wants to leap from the desk. Oh, there he goes.
Nice.
He didn't think he could make it, but he made it. But regardless, his platform as a politician is this like populist working class thing where he's like, I care about the working man, because he was poor and was adopted by a rich guy because his parents like didn't want to have to put him through the throes of poverty. And, but the thing is, he's a very superficially pro worker guy, like he's not actually there for the working class. And we see that later on where, all of that he's said about it gets undercut when late organized labor is starting to take hold as a movement in America. And one of his cronies is like, look, you think you're for the working man, but they're gonna want a piece, they're gonna want theirs. And that's kind of when any of his quasi-socialist espousments kind of fade away to the backdrop. And I think that makes it a really interesting movie because Wells is obviously a lefty, but he's already complicating things, like Wells being a lefty doesn't mean he's just gonna be like, all right, let's make a movie about how rotten capitalism is by having a cool socialist, Instead he has like a tycoon capitalist who poses as someone who is there to help the downtrodden, but is actually just looking out for his own best interest, and how greed can completely transform a person into someone who only cares for material things. And of course the what appears to be a red herring, the chase for the meaning of Rosebud, when it's finally revealed that it's his childhood sled, it's very clear that the allure of the rat race of capitalism is what demolished the hopes of his youth and happiness. And this idea is extrapolated further in Mank. I like
to check it out.
Honestly, Mank, for it being such like people getting so mad at being like anti Orson Welles or whatever, and it does make Welles seem to be like an egoist and like kind of a blowhard, which he is a blowhard, but he deserves to be.
Yeah,
maybe blowhard's the wrong word. He's a windbag, But Mank shows the Upton Sinclair political campaign and actually shows him as like a real socialist, and maybe that's a way of like undercutting the cynicism of Kane, because Wells, for being a progressive and a lefty, like he's also a cynic because he knows what the chances for the left in America are, which are slim to none.
Like there's like that sequence where like they show someone calling him like a communist, and then they show someone calling him a fascist, right? And then like he, we hear him talk, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm an American. Like I reject all those labels." And I feel like that's like any like sinister capitalist out there. It's like they even like they might even refuse the labels of what they are, but like and kind of like reject like, oh, that's like a common like thing. People are like, I'm not like left or right, like I'm just like I have my own way of looking at things. And it kind of reminded me of a Vincent Gallo Instagram comment, but it links where he was posting with Trump after he won. Trump, another big fan of this movie. And
we're going to have to put the clip in for sure. I mean, if you haven't watched or heard Trump's review of this movie, you do not know what you're missing. It's
pretty funny to just maybe find out, like, wait, Vincent Gallo's into, like, this conservatism shit? Wait, what the hell? But then, like, there's someone on his Instagram, mad at him and calling him like, oh, you're like a white supremacist, which he definitely is. And then he's like, no, I reject, like, I'm a super American. You know what I mean? That's who I am. And it's like that feels so like that's like a 1-to-1 to the comment that Kane makes here. And I don't know. I just had to link that into the episode somehow.
Yeah,
I mean, people have been using that forever as a refrain. Like, I'm not a blank, I'm an American. And the irony of it is always that, like, it can mean anything. You know, like Philip Roth said that about himself. He was like, I'm not a Jew, I'm an American.
Yeah.
And for him, I think that means something much more ironic than when Vincent Gallo says, I'm not a white supremacist, I'm an American, you know? But it is getting at the same idea of America as a land of contradictions and, you know, for some people, opportunity, and for some people, squandered opportunity.
The relationship that he had was not a good one for him, probably not a great one for her, although there were benefits for her. But in the end, she was certainly not a happy camper. There was a great rise in Citizen Kane. And there was a modest fall. The fall wasn't a financial fall, the fall was a personal fall. But it was a fall nevertheless.
You know, if you could give Charles Foster Kane advice, what would you say to him?
Get yourself a different woman.
For me, it's just like, I mean, again, how central that is, and just how, like, I feel like, I mean, talking about, like, how the definition of American is kind of muddled or whatever. I think that Wells, as a filmmaker, even though he feels like, just the way he presents himself feels like hoity-toity kind of European in a way. He has that sort of, like, sensibility to him. Just thinking about Kane, and in general, Kane in particular, and I'd say maybe less so like the rest of the body of his work, but he feels like the distinct, like, American artist of, like, the 20th century in a lot of ways, especially, like, the larger than life individualist showman persona that he takes on. And I mean, like, to some extent, like, I think he's, like, obviously aware of it and, like, is, like, playing into it, and there's, like, some irony there. But, like, again, I think, like, also, like, a part of his Americanness is the fact that he feels a little European and can shed it at some times. But then you can fall back on this, like, no, well, I'm just, like, an American kind of thing. And obviously the way in which Wells is invoking it in Citizen Kane is, like, not, like, earnest or sincere, like Gallo trying to duck, like, white supremacy. Wells is, like, very much so getting at, like, that sort of a blanket statement to cover, like, to I don't know, hide your ideological goals.
Well, I think also Wells is someone who studied art and art history in the way that he does throughout his career, referring to all these great classics and like his European period, especially evoking them through the use of architecture and sculpture and whatnot, and using Shakespeare. And like I feel like he's someone who understands the idea that American art is still very new and doesn't have an identity in 1941. And maybe it will by 1946, honestly. Like, I think post World War II, there becomes more of an American identity to the Hollywood cinema. But before World War II, Hollywood cinema was just like the better version of European cinema. Like, it really, there wasn't too much Americanness to it, like outside of people like John Ford, you know?
Yeah, like
and
westerns and shit.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, there were a lot of European imports too, like before and after the war, but especially before, like when the Nazis first came to power. And then so you have all these like German directors in early Hollywood shaping it. And, you know, German Expressionism plays a big part in that. Like, very early on in this movie, when one of the journalists goes to that like Hall of Records, the Thatcher Library, where he has like a giant 500-foot room that exists just to have one book in it, one giant book. And it's a very German Expressionist setup there between the set design, lighting, shot composition, and all of that. And I think that Wells uses expressionistic imagery like that when it's necessary to means something more than it actually means on the surface. You know, like this room is just a room with a book, but it's also the portal into the past, you know, so it's going to have this like grand expressionist design to it.
Yeah, and like I like rewatching, another thing like I notice is that I feel like a lot of the buildings in this, especially once we kind of get out of flashback mode, it's just like every building is huge, and like every character is either like, you know, maybe like a Kane, like larger than life figure, or but then there's just like a lot of like just a lot of people like slinking through the shadows and just kind of tragic figures as well. I just found like there's just like a severity in like how people are depicted in this movie, and then also it matched with like the actual settings itself, like that set piece you just gave as an example. I feel like there's just a lot of instances where there's just like these huge rooms, and then there's just a bunch of people kind of like in the shadows, not like the most well lit, and in a way, you know, it makes kind of like the magnetism of a Kane character, even though he's not necessarily positively depicted. Like it feels like everyone in Kane's life is like, you know, kind of works in like either a service role, or, you know, even like his lover or like his best friend. Like there's kind of like an expectation of like subservience. And I think through production design and like the very dramatic camera choices, it's just like you just really feel that aspect of the movie.
If you've been to film school or anything, there's like so many images in this that are seared into your brain as like what they teach you, you know, like young Kane getting adopted and you see him playing out the window. It's like that is both deep focus and multi-plane staging 101, you know, and for us, we might take that for granted, but that's not something people were seeing at the movies back then. But beyond it just being deep focus and multi-plane staging, like that's also one of the, like, I didn't really even think about the image before that, because I always thought about it as just like, oh, that's the image that shows you these things, these techniques. It really is a strange funhouse image where like I don't know, something about the depth perception is like a little off, where young Wells, or young Kane rather, out the window, he looks like he's like trapped in a box on the table with these three people discussing his future, you know? Like you can tell the depth, you understand the depth of the shot, but at the same time, the fact that we are watching a 2D proscenium of a screen like really puts him right at the forefront of the screen too, because that's where our focus naturally goes to this kid who we know is gonna be so consequential to the movie, and he's just trapped in a square box that is the window to the outside. And I don't know, like that image to me felt like proto-Lynchian when I was kind of looking at it too long, and it became kind of surreal to me.
I mean, there's definitely like elements of surrealness to this, and like very pointed decision making in the film, in the filmmaking here, where I don't know, something like later on where what's his wife's name?
The first wife?
No, the second wife.
Oh,
Susan?
Susan, yeah.
Susan, when Susan's like, you know, basically tried to kill herself because of how rigorous her opera career is. And she's like, you know, laying on the bed, and then like the shot just opens with like whatever, like the syrup medicine that's like on her nightstand,
yeah,
in the complete foreground. And then like Kane and his butler knock down the door, and like, and she's just kind of like in like no man's land, Susan in the image, and there's kind of like this heavy focus on the medicine. And then I feel like there's a whole series that kind of plays out where it's just like the foreground is like heavily prioritized while still maintaining like this deep focus. And it just like, I don't know, it just really hammers home that kind of like hazy, sick feeling. Yeah. But like in her case, it's even more so because she took enough medicine to, you know, potentially harm herself. And there's just tons of stuff like that throughout the movie where like you wouldn't see in like other classic Hollywood movies, where there's just like, it's such a pointed, different decision is made outside of the normal framework of filmmaking at the time, where it just feels like, I don't know, just like making the image that certain way just really emphasizes the negative and queasy feelings of that moment.
Yeah.
And like in terms of like these images, and I feel like part of the reason we like talked around Citizen Kane so much, or part of the reason I feel like conversations about like a movie that is referred to as like one of the greatest ever, like you have to include like legacy in that conversation, is because like unlike I don't know, other movies that are like maybe better, equally as great, not as much, whatever you want to say, like the fact that these images have become so iconic and like after the fact, I think take on like sort of ulterior meanings, or like especially I was thinking about like the mirror sequence with older Kane like walking down the halls, like one that's just like an impressive and like beautiful shot just showing just like I don't know the like the inward loop of Kane sort of eating his own life away. Not like literally, I mean, though he does balloon, but like you see images like that and you see like the fall of this character. And I mean, you can't help but like, obviously Orson Welles is a significantly more likable individual than the character he portrays in Citizen Kane. But like seeing this so many years after the fact and knowing this is like the titanic, like artistic, like success that he has like early on as the young man that he actually is in the early portions of this film, that he does to some extent become the fat, washed up, like kind of a little bit more bitter guy towards the tail end of his career. Like it does, like you have to, knowing that information going into the film, it does sort of like shape how you sort of process these images. And I love that aspect of the movie too, because it's just like, again, talking about it as like this sort of like, I don't know, film school object or something that is just like has this sort of like legacy to it. And when you go in, like obviously I feel like very quickly you realize, oh, it's fun, approachable, being funny, like just a gorgeous film, something like very playful narrative, very easy to get lost in. You can recognize it as itself, but then I don't know, it's just interesting. I would say more so than any other movie, the way the legacy around the film itself and the filmmaker have helped change the meaning of some of those images.
Absolutely. And I mean, I just think that like the second half, it gets into a more like traditional storytelling mode a little bit, but it's just so effective. The stuff with Susan, the singer, like, I mean, obviously the tragic irony of his political career getting thwarted because he gets caught in a love nest with her. And then, you know, it's like this yellow journalism machine, this tabloid machine that he helped create in America is what's undoing his political career. And the savagery of the headline, putting quotes around the word singer, is just... I mean, always gets me. Truly, like, one of the most petty fucking old hen things ever is, like, continually calling her a quote-unquote singer. But that really comes into a part because it's like, she wants to be a singer. He's the richest man in America, so he'll make it happen for her. And we see her have two separate, like, debuts that are just horrible, you know? And Wells is pulling out all the stops as the filmmaker to extenuate that. Like the first scene of her singing, just you get this incredible, impossible crane shot, you know, soaring up from the performance into the rafters, and it's this like incredibly impressive thing, but it's just so you can land on two crew members in the rafters holding their nose, doing the classic PU thing to her, you know, and it's just like all of this extravagance to show you that she kind of sucks and he's just kind of biting the bullet, like accepting his fate. Like, well, you know, everyone knows that I ruined my marriage to be with this woman, so I might as well just keep supporting her shitty singing career. Yeah. And it's that being a plot line of Citizen Kane, like that is most of the second half of the movie, is that. I don't know why, I just don't I always forget that that's a lot of what this movie's about, is like a guy with a girlfriend who he tries to help make into a singer, but she sucks too bad. Like, that's a tale as old as time. Like, that's today you don't know how many people are doing that.
Yeah, and he like tries to like make her, you know, a viable in the opera world, almost like trying to flex his own muscles to see if he still has that type of influence. Like I do find it funny, like, you know, we get a nice montage sequence of like the newspapers there once she's going on tour, right? She's hitting up St. Louis, she's hitting up Memphis, and like I just find it funny. It's just like the front page of every newspaper being like, opera singer coming to town, come check her out. Like, it's like, damn, this is pretty shameless promotion here by old Charles Foster here. And like that's a scene I didn't remember as much, the scene where he's kind of confronted by the politician he's running against and his first wife and Susan, you know, his current lover, and his
Jay Gittes.
Jay Gittes. Yeah, that sounds like a guy who could do some snooping. It's just very interesting, you know, in like stories of like people trying to be powerful and ambitious, right? Like, you know, a lot of people would try to make a deal to like keep that out of the newspaper or try to recover his career, but Kane makes the decision to, you know, throw it all away and like do it on his own terms. And I think that like kind of connects back to like this American individualism, kind of like I have the power and influence to do things my way, and I have to protect that at all costs, even if it is at the risk of, you know, not reaching political office and not reaching the goals of the Reform Party that I'm sure Charles Foster Kane cared so much about. And it's just a very interesting decision where I feel like most narratives, you know, it would be like getting into him trying to get his like political career back on track, but just following this you know, Susan subplot is, you know, I think it's a very interesting and very incisive decision. And also it's kind of like the classic you know, it may be classics, but it's like it's the thing of this movie where it's like, all right, there's people, rich and powerful people, who put out these you know, signals or veneers of like who they want to be, but like behind closed doors, how do they actually act? And that's always, I know you could apply that to everyone, but it's like, I think it's just interesting to, at the very beginning, you're getting what everyone else says about him. You're seeing all his, you know, his possessions and his mansion and all this stuff, and his newspaper, how he built his legacy. But then it's like Joseph Cotton saying like, yeah, but he just wants like love, or, you know what I mean? Like you get to see like the desperation behind closed doors. And I think just Wells's priorities and interests are just so different than like a lot of other classic Hollywood movies at the time that are very focused on having this very like clear morality, where, I don't know, Wells is kind of like all over the place while still maintaining, you know, a certain message, but just delivered in a very different way than would be used to at the time.
I mean, people have gone back and forth on this over the years, but I don't think it's like the biggest shocker now, knowing that How Green Was My Valley won Best Picture over this. And first of all, I agree, How Green Was My Valley, pretty much a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't really fight on that one, but it definitely has that Hollywood morality to it, even if that movie is like a little off the beaten path and is like about a Welsh mining town and stuff like that. It still has like a Hollywood morality to it, you know, whereas this one is just so cynical that I could see why people were like, you know, I appreciate the technical stuff, but giving it to my boy Jack Ford.
Yeah, I know William Randolph Hearst, and I'm not trying.
I don't think he's that bad.
Yeah, I don't think he's that. I'd chill with him at the. It's not, you know, I think he hates his wife, but it's not like that big of a deal, you know.
Was Jim Geddes supposed to be J. Paul Getty?
I feel like that has
Probably.
to be.
But
yeah.
Jim Geddes, and then in Chinatown, Jack Nicholson is Jake Gittes. Close enough. Close enough.
The Geddes. They're all over history, huh?
They are. We can't go beat for beat through Citizen Kane. It would take 5 hours. But speaking of something that comes in fives, I'm giving this movie 5 bullets. I think that it's phenomenal. It is a movie that lives up to the hype entirely, and if you are intimidated by it at all, it is like a real whirlwind of comedic timing and expressionistic photography and breakneck montage and amazing performances. And it's Citizen Kane, folks. What about you, Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it, you know, Eddie revealed my old rating, you know, and we do change and evolve here on the show. I'm gonna give it 5 bullets. There's just a couple notes I want to fire off before the episode's done. That moment where the journalist is asking one of the butlers, what's Rosebud? And like, the butler does have a story, and I think it's when Susan is leaving him, and then it just cuts to a fucking cockatoo jump scare. You get the bird noise, and then like that flashback is basically just Kane just completely trashing the room, you know what I mean, all the nice stuff. And I'm like, damn, this like 3 minutes of cinema here basically invented Adult Swim, you know what I mean? Like you could take that 3-minute sequence and say it's like a transition bumper on Adult Swim. That works.
Parakeet, the bird squawk thing is crazy, because you had just seen like their giant fight in the jungle, and then it wraps back to the current day, and then it goes back to them fighting more. And so that squawk is like, to me, signifies reopening the wound of the flashback, and it's like, oh, you thought you had enough pain? Let's go back and get it even more painful, and just have Wells going all-timer rage mode, destroying a room for 3 minutes.
Yeah, that is so interesting, because it is like you see their breakup, and then it like, other things happen, and then it like, it cuts to it, and it's like, it was actually worse than you thought. And then also just like the opera singing stuff, like I've, talking about the humor of the movie, I find it so funny that like when like the opera singer is training Susan in private, and like he's just like, no, like you sing it like this, and then just like it'd just be so funny to be like an opera singer flexing on your students who can't sing opera at all, just being like hitting all those high notes. And it also, because it seems like, she wants to be a singer. I don't know if she wants to be an opera singer necessarily. And like, it just made me think of like that has to be, I get why she fucking swallowed all that cough syrup or whatever the fuck she was drinking there, because like, imagine being like trying to do opera and you just can't do it, just trying to sing, like just being on stage and trying to hit like the highest notes of all time, and you're just like, just can't make it there. Like that has to be so torturous.
No, it's just like
I can't even do it as a joke.
He just like the way in which the Kane character just like punishes her for his own like failures, having this affair, and just being like, well, no, actually, you're gonna be a singer. I'm building you a fucking opera house. We're doing this, and every night you have to embarrass yourself in front of a more and more like just dwindling crowd. And my best friend is gonna write the hit piece review about you,
and he's gonna finish it off too.
Yeah.
Classic. I mean, we can only dream for that in a partner. Someone who will fund our shitty movies, just like, my wife put $5 million into this movie, and it made $8 at the box office.
That's an artist's come up right there. That's like, that might be a more viable path than the normal film industry right now.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
That's why I'm trying to get in shape. I'm trying to work on my body.
JT, any final thoughts on a rating?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 5 bullets on this as well. It's just a masterpiece. I mean, there's so much here that I feel like, I don't know, we didn't even get into. I mean, I think that like, I touched on it a little bit with like seeing the older Wells, but like all of the like character like makeup and like costuming just like looks sensational. And I mean, I think they like could obviously at that point in like the film industry like could do that stuff pretty decently, but I feel like the Citizen Kane like aging like surpasses like even some stuff now where it just looks sensational.
He looks so good as the old man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just, again, so much great stuff. I had written down, I think my favorite line of dialogue is the Joseph Cotton Leland character basically just spelling it all out. You don't care about anything except you. You just want to persuade people that you love them so much that they ought to love you back. Only you want love on your own terms, something to be played your way according to your rules. And that's just that shit is hard. That cuts so deep.
I mean, also, I think the best line in this movie, if we're just saying one-liners, and I'm going to get the phrasing wrong, so I'll put the clip, but when he's first running the Inquirer and his adopted dad, his benefactor, is getting all pissed at him for being in the hole $1 million, and he's like,
You're right, Mr. Thatcher. I did lose $1 million last year. I expect to lose $1 million this year. I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place in 60 years.
So
like,
good.
that's the ultimate mindset. Like, that is the true I don't care about money mindset. And then he becomes, a magnate and a politician, and it goes beyond just, building up a good newspaper. It's building up an image of an empire, and that's where you fail.
Also, I had an idea for the legacy sequel for Citizen Kane.
Okay.
Citizen Kane 2. And I mean, it's just like, I think the biggest thing is you do like a fuck ton of like promotion and things like that. You're really hyping it up because it's just like, this is the greatest movie ever made, like whatever, you're really pumping that. Maybe it's probably going to air on a like streaming service or something like that. You probably like you build a new streaming service that you have a bunch of people subscribe to. You create like an insane level of hype. Like, what is this going to be? What is this going to be about? And Citizen Kane 2, it starts whatever. There's like the similar like intro to like the big like oppressive like castle, but like this time it's like a house in like the Hollywood Hills or whatever. And then we push in and like we get into the room. It's like Steven Spielberg on his like deathbed. He's like about to die. He has a snow globe, but it has like a child's. It's a child's beating heart in a jar with like the adrenochrome, and he drops that, and he says Rosebud, and then people like come into, and it's like, what? Like, why did he say Rosebud? And then you're like, oh, didn't you know he owns the Rosebud sled from Citizen Kane? He owns that movie prop. And it's like a 2 or 3 minute movie in total because they've just solved that mystery right there.
It's a short film.
But that's Citizen Kane too.
That would be amazing. That's very like 2010s marketing, like building something up like it's going to be a feature film, and then it just directs you to a website.
Yeah, no, it's like a Super Bowl ad. Yeah,
exactly. It's like the GoDaddy commercials. See the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like the two butlers are there, and he says Rosebud. It's like, what did he say? Rosebud?
Oh, like Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
no, he owns the sled. Yeah. He's a rich director.
Like the movie. You remember that in the movie?
So I guess he said that because he really likes Orson Welles and wanted to be like him?
Well, maybe he's just more of a fan of the movie. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. I was always more of a George Lucas guy.
Yeah. That's what Quibi needed to stay afloat, right?
Yeah.
That sounded like a perfect Quibi idea because it fits in their short format. You know what I mean?
I'm a few years too late.
I know that it's like, no one wants to, but that's why like we need to take matters in our own hands and do the legacy reboot sequels ourselves, because it's like I don't want them to exist, but they have to be done right. Like exactly. That's how you do Citizen Kane, not Mank, or not like I don't know, what would Netflix do if they hadn't done Mank? It would be like a 6-part miniseries about the girl with the parasol that the guy describes.
I've always wanted to know more about that.
Always wanted to know what she looks like. That is a bit from Mank. Yeah, he starts describing that like they recreate that scene and it cuts away to a girl on a boat, like actually shows what the girl with the parasol looks like, which is a very like stupid joke, but I don't know. I saw people get upset about that when Mank came out, but then I thought about it more, and it's like, that's basically like the cinephile version of the Simpsons joke of that's the Kane from Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Like showing the girl with the parasol where it's supposed to just be the monologue and in the guy's mind is like, it's that level of obviousness where Fincher couldn't have not been laughing at it.
Yeah, I think we might need to do a Mank episode because
do.
I know you in your heart you want to defend it as hard as
good.
possible. You love it. You fucking love Mank.
I don't love it, but it's good.
You do. It's okay. No,
I love the idea of
Well,
Mank.
rewatching Citizen Kane, it will probably is like the closest I think you can get to actually like it's pushed me to the line now where it's like, well, I just watched Citizen Kane. I ought to watch Mank. I want to
Mank.
know what happened with everything to get up to this point.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Maybe we need to strike while the iron's hot. But
It's a good movie. It's
Yeah.
not great, but it's like a solid 3.
I'm willing to be reconvinced. I'm willing to, I'm an open-minded individual, But that is, we're on the 5-year anniversary, which is...
It is coming up on the 5-year anniversary of Mank.
People
That's true.
love an anniversary, man. Let me tell you that.
Trust me, we've talked about that before. That is the entire backbone of the film journalism industry.
Everyone's
is
got
anniversaries.
Everyone's got like a calendar that has like the anniversary of like each movie that comes out. Like everyone's like, oh, it's like the Butterfly and the Diving Bell 12-year anniversary. I better talk about that.
Well, that's going to do it on Citizen Kane.
Wait, I guess that will. Sorry to steamroll you there. That was a bit harsh. But I just wanted to ask. Just
it's my
quick,
job to steamroll on
exactly.
this podcast.
Whoa! Hold up.
Malcolm's cutting in.
Sure, I remember one time I did the intro. You took that very seriously, and you cut that out. So I will have to. I will tread lightly here.
I don't remember that.
It was
must have
definitely
been
years
doing a
ago.
bit.
It was funny. It was funny. I don't know if I did it well either. That could also be part of it too. Have you guys been to Hearst Castle? You guys ever been to
No,
Hearst?
but I want to. It has one of the only real IMAX screens in California.
Oh, really?
And they just show a documentary about Hearst Castle that was shot on IMAX every day.
I was going to say, are they showing Oppenheimer? Up in
No,
that
I
bitch?
wish. It's such a waste. There's like 5 actual film IMAX theaters in America.
Wow.
And one of them is at Hearst Castle, and they just on loop show a documentary about Hearst Castle.
Damn. Well, that's Hearst Castle is. I remember going there as a kid and like just being like, this is like fucking great. Because obviously the common knowledge is that this movie is heavily inspired by like the real life guy, William Randolph Hearst, and he was like a media magnate, and he did have this huge fucking house. And like, I don't know, like that scene where like Susan's like making a puzzle and like Citizen Kane is. I like calling him Citizen Kane too, but like Kane is sitting like 20 miles away and they're having a distant conversation because they're distant in their relationship. Like Hearst Castle really is that big and more. I don't know. I really want to go back. And now that there's a movie screen aspect to it too, something I could post on Letterboxd, you know what I mean?
Now that it's like, we could write it off for the podcast. That's a podcasting expense.
It's only like a couple hours away too, like 2.5, 3 hours.
We could go right now.
We could go
like there's
right
literally nothing stopping Malcolm and I from going to Hearst Castle right now, but I don't think it's going to happen.
It's not going to happen, but that's a freeing thought in my head.
Maybe we make a plan and make a trip up there someday.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Do they still have the animals from Hearst's zoo?
No, I don't remember that, but that'd be great if they had a 70-year-old tiger.
Well, maybe we'll make a stop at the zoo on the way.
Whoa! Then we free all the animals from the zoo.
You ever
and we
been to the
drive
LA
away.
Zoo?
I've been to the abandoned old zoo, but not the
actual
not the
LA zoo
actual
at
LA
Griffith.
zoo. Yeah,
From what I remember, it's pretty good.
we should. Yeah, we're just making play dates basically. It's like,
We
let's
are
go to the
making play
zoo.
dates.
Let's go to Hearst Castle.
My calendar's opened up considerably as of late. I think it's time for me to go on some adventures, some male adventures.
But what about there's a fucking Sofia Coppola's The Beguiled 2017 7-year anniversary tomorrow.
That's
so
true.
you will be busy.
I will be seated for that one. I'm gonna go back to where I saw it. I actually can't. Damn, that theater's closed.
Damn. That
was the old Northridge, like the Pacific Winnetka.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Which somehow is not an AMC yet. Like, that is a 21 screen theater. How did they not make it into a new theater yet?
It's funny that I saw the Beguiled remake with like my dad and my grandma, and we all agreed that it sucked, and then we went home and we watched the original Beguiled.
Damn,
Pretty
that's crazy.
Pretty
awesome.
baller move. Pretty.
That is very baller to like with a grandparent just like throw on the OG right after.
Well, double featuring.
We need a
shit.
cleansing.
Yeah, enough of this. Yeah.
Well, they were running those as a double feature at the New Bev, and I can only imagine the audience reactions. Like, what? Why did I just do a second movie? Like,
that was pretty similar to the first one I just watched.
Yeah. So that's going to do it on Citizen Kane. You can always email us at extendedclippodcast@gmail.com. This one, I think, is only for JT, basically. It's from Chase. It says, and you'll see what I mean by that. Good morning, boys. I'm glad that Chase addressed us as morning boys because it is the morning.
He knows.
Good morning, boys. You recently chatted a little about Iceberg Slim and the possibility of the pre-code pimp flick. It made me think, while it isn't pre-code, Billy Wilder's Irma La Duce is a tale about the lengths Jack Lemmon will go to stop Shirley MacLaine, his girlfriend and bottom bitch, from having sex with anyone else. This includes working 12 hours a day in a slaughterhouse so he can play dress up as a British lord and pay her each night for her services. That's crazy. Have any of you seen that one? It's not Wilder's best, but it's an underappreciated gem in my opinion. Very goofy and a nice post-apartment reunion for Lemmon and MacLaine. Absolutely wild that she is still alive, and so is her brother, Warren Beatty. What is going on in that family? Good genes, I guess. Have a good one. Chase.
That's a great. I love saying that about an old person. That's crazy that they're still alive.
What is going on?
We've been waiting on their deaths for a minute now, because that's another form of celebration too. So
Warren Beatty is 87 years old. What is going on?
He eats the veggies, man. He gets all the vitamins and the
I'll
vegetables.
tell you, that's good genes. That is probably just good genes, you know.
Yeah.
JT, you've seen Irma La Duce, right?
Yeah, I have, and I really like this one a lot. I think the later like Lemmon Wilder collabs are pretty awesome, and I mean, I definitely have an affinity for Jack Lemmon, but like I don't know, it is fun to see, just like I don't know, I think very crazy. Like Wilder working with prostitution in the 60s. Like, it's a fun setup. And I don't know. Anytime, like, it was one of those movies, I think the first time I saw it, there's such a wild range of, like, mutuals, like, letterbox scores from, like, 5s to 1s to, like, 3s, where it's just, like, you know you're in for quite a picture when you see that spread.
I definitely am like looking forward to that one. I haven't watched it because it's like almost 3 hours long too. If I remember correctly, it's like very long.
Like at least 2 and change.
Yeah, it's 147 minutes.
147 minutes, and what JT said about the range of responses, like honestly a lot of 1s and half stars.
Damn.
Not a lot, but like a handful of 1s and half stars, handful of 5s, and handful of 3s. Like it really is all over the place for like a long late period Billy Wilder shot in Europe movie. Is it shot in Italy?
Yes.
At the Cinecittà Studios. So yeah, I definitely will watch that one soon. I think that like post Fedora, I downloaded a handful more Billy Wilder movies I haven't seen. So gonna get to Sweet Irma soon enough. Yeah, and I love Shirley MacLaine. I mean, obviously The Apartment's great, but like her performance in Some Came Running is one of my all-time favorites. Like one of the greatest performances of all time.
Oh wait, actually, correction, I was wrong. It was shot in the United States, and I think just a little bit of some exteriors were shot in Paris.
Some pickups on the greater continent. Yeah. Just kidding. The weak continent.
Yeah. I got upset there for a second. You know, just to we're talking about Iceberg Slim. We do not promote that type of, we do not think pimping is cool. I just wanted to. Well, okay. Well, that's what's great about this podcast. There's a lot of differing opinions.
Yeah, diversity of opinion.
And that's what I value above most, not, the negative stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. So you're just like anti-sex work then?
Nah, well,
I mean,
no.
that's fine if you want to be anti-sex work. Like, you're a man of the law. You know, I get that it's illegal.
Yes, I am. That is true. You're right there. But no. Well,
see,
no.
I think that like in certain circumstances you can break the law. Like, you know, steal a loaf of bread to feed your family. Turn someone out on the street to feed your family.
Well, yeah, if you have kids, then I guess I could be. You got to feed your kids.
Yeah.
So,
look,
yeah. JT, can we get what's your thumbs up, thumbs down on pimping?
I don't really know where I stand about pimping, prostitution, or sex work.
Well, I'm just talking pimping. I'm just talking
pimping.
Yeah.
All I have to say, I'm not a pimp. I'm just an American.
Goodbye, everybody.
Mr. Burns, if you don't mind, I've prepared a little musical number for Jack's special night. There is a man. A certain man. A man whose grace and handsome face are known across the land. You know his name. It's Mr. Burns. He loves a smoke, enjoys a joke. Why, he's worth 10 times what he earns.
He's Mr. Burns.
I'm Mr. Burns. He's Monty Burns.
Mr. Burns.
To friends he's known as Monty, but to you it's Mr. Burns. Burns.
Burns.